Good morning, and welcome to the 64th Institute of Nuclear Materials Management Joint Annual Meeting, held in partnership with the European Safeguards Research and Development Association. I'm Mark Schanfein, President of the Institute of Nuclear Materials Management, and together with Marie Lahti, President of ESARDA, we are proud to open this meeting. In 1958, 1 year after the formation of the International Atomic Energy Agency, a group of individuals with great foresight established the Institute. They saw the need for an independent organization to promote responsible stewardship of nuclear material, to support the great promise of nuclear power and the hope for nuclear disarmament. We have grown much since then, broadening both our policy and technical focuses. For the first time in those 64 years, we are holding our annual meeting outside the United States, in the beautiful city of Vienna. This decision also took great foresight and was decided long before my tenure as president. I thank those in the earlier executive committee, most notably Corey Henderstein and Carrie Crawford, for making that bold decision, and the myriad of INMM, ESARDA, and our contractor support staff who made this annual meeting a reality. We have an exciting program for you all week with leaders in the many fields that INMM and ESARDA cover. I particularly want to point out our opening plenary session that follows with the esteemed participants, and I want to thank Valeria Hesse for arranging both plenaries. It's a very full program with nearly 500 aspects and 9 parallel sessions during the next 4 days, and I'm sure you'll find a lot of interesting papers, posters and panels, lunch and learn, a wide range of exhibits, and other opportunities for you to engage with all presenters. With so many parallel sessions, keep in mind that all who are registered have on-demand access for 1 year, so you don't have to miss any session. And please spread the word that on-demand access is available for a small fee for those who cannot attend this year's meeting. I'm not going to review the whole program in detail, but I will draw your attention to a few highlights. This evening, please join Marie and me for the President's reception, with entertainment provided by the IAEA house band, Just the Troubles. We have a special session on Tuesday afternoon on the Russian war against Ukraine and the future of the nuclear order, consequences for nuclear security, non-proliferation, safety, and arms control. On Wednesday, May 24th, during the afternoon break, we have an additional protocol celebration by Australia, and that includes a cake. At 6:30 on Wednesday, I hope you have registered for the Women of Mass Distinction reception at the Ark Hotel. On Friday, we have a special workshop organized by Texas A&M University on the fundamentals of safeguards, and there is still time to register for it and you are all invited to our open technical meetings, division meetings, that same day. I would like to thank Chris Pickett, Joel Hoyt, Scott Stewart, Ermi Niemeyer, and Joshua Rutkowski, the INMM ESARDA Technical Program Chairs, and Morris Hassler, the Annual Meeting Chair, for putting together another spectacular annual meeting. I also want to thank all of our INMM and ESARDA committees, working groups, and technical divisions. They worked year-round to make this meeting and all the work of the Institute and Association happen. I hope you'll be able to attend the awards ceremony and fellows presentations on Thursday afternoon at 4 p.m. here in Hall D. Recognizing our members by presenting awards and promotions to the membership rank of fellow is one of the honors I have as president of the Institute. I want to take a moment to thank the awards committee and the fellows committee for the work in reviewing this year's nominations and creating the presentations. For the awards committee, I'd like to recognize Arden Dugan, Joshua Rutkowski, Joseph Indusi. For the Fellows Committee, many thanks to Nancy Jo Nicholas. Thank you for those who took the time to nominate their colleagues for this recognition, and congratulations to all the recipients of the 2023 INMM Awards and our new fellows. I encourage all meeting attendees to visit the poster sessions on Tuesday and Wednesday, starting at 10 a.m. in Foyer D. This year we have 37 posters. Poster presenters will be there during this time to share their work and answer any questions you have. I encourage you to stop by and admire the hard work and new ideas presented. If you want to meet with an author outside of this window, you can use the INMM app to contact them. And finally, the INMM and ESARDA have a respectful behavior policy. We welcome all opinions that are offered politely and respectfully, but we cannot tolerate abusive language, bullying, or harassment. Make a point to be kind and respectful, even if you disagree with someone. I now turn the podium over to Mari.
Thank you, Mark. It is a great pleasure to open this joint annual meeting in person and to be in Vienna, the capital of nuclear safeguards and security. For ESARDA, this is the 45th annual meeting. And thanks to the vision of our previous presidents, Ermi Niemeyer, Willem Janssens, and Julie Audoux, we were able to execute this idea of bringing the two professional societies together, expanding each other's outreach, and being able to attract new participants. Already in 2021, we implemented a virtual annual meeting together, which was a unique endeavor for both sides. Today, we are particularly pleased to meet our colleagues of the two communities together with a strong international participation and colleagues of the IAEA and CTBTO. This meeting takes place in a time of many unusual and worrying international developments, also in nuclear safeguards, non-proliferation, nuclear security, and related trade control. It is important that the scientific community provides sound technical analysis of the situation and contributes to peaceful and acceptable solutions. Our communities, consisting of nuclear inspectorates, authorities, regulators, operators, industry, researchers, NGOs, and academics represent a valuable mix of key stakeholders in this multidisciplinary field. I look forward to a week filled with rich discussions, new insights, scientific breakthroughs, and who knows, some revolutionary proposals. Today, new geographical areas in the world are looking into advanced ways of using nuclear energy. It is important that also the young generation stays interested in nuclear technology and the safeguards and security aspects that we discuss this week. In this context, I would like to mention ESARDA's engagements with students. We organize yearly a course on nuclear safeguards and non-proliferation, implemented by our colleagues of the Joint Research Centre of the European Commission. And based on this success, the European Commission funded specialized master's course in nuclear safeguards was held for the first time last year, and the next one will start in November. Before concluding, I would like to remind you of our closing plenary on Thursday, with three distinguished speakers. AFCON Executive Secretary Enobot Akboro, who will discuss the future of nuclear energy in Africa. STUG Director Jaakko Leino, giving us an outlook on final disposal. And from Open Nuclear Network, Research and Analysis Manager Marcy Fowler, providing insight on the challenge of disinformation and open source analysis. And then to conclude, I would like to warmly thank the whole INMM and ESARDA community for making this event to happen. I'm very grateful for the work of the ESARDA working groups and their chairs, the editorial committee, the executive board, our secretary, and of course our past presidents. Thank you for your kind attention. I truly look forward to interactive and productive sessions and discussions. We are now ready for our opening plenary, so may I introduce our moderator, Mariana Pucherin, who is Senior Research Associate at the Harvard Kennedy School Belfer Center Project on Managing the Atom. Please, Mariana, the floor is yours.
Thank you all very much for inviting me to moderate this panel, and I welcome all peace and progress. We have an incredible lineup of speakers that will cover rather diverse topics, all of them of great relevance to this community. I will introduce the speakers briefly. You can consult their full biographies on the meeting website. Please do so. Each of the speakers will have a few minutes for their prepared remarks on a specified topic that you can see up here, and then we'll open it up for questions from the audience. So without further ado, let me introduce our first speaker. It is the Director General of the International Atomic Energy Agency, Rafael Mariano Grossi. He has prepared for us a recorded address, a set of recorded remarks that will play for us soon. And we also have in person with us today Corey Sylvester, who is the Director of the Division of Concepts and Planning at the IAEA Department of Safeguards, who is here to answer all of your questions on behalf of Director General and the agency. So let's hear it from Director General Grossi.
Thank you for inviting me to address this, your second joint annual meeting of the Institute of Nuclear Materials Management and ESARDA. I'm sorry that given my constraints and current travel schedule, I'm not able to meet with you in person, but let me welcome you warmly and tell you how much I value and appreciate your work. I was asked to give you an update on the safety and security situation at Ukraine nuclear power plants and to tell you about the IAEA's work to protect them. Of course, the first and most urgent thing has to do with the general situation in and around Ukraine's Zaporizhia nuclear power plant. The situation I have characterized it as becoming increasingly unpredictable and potentially very, very dangerous. There are very real, very serious nuclear safety and security risks, and it is imperative that we protect Ukraine's and Europe's biggest nuclear power plant. I will continue to press for a commitment by all sides to achieve this objective, which is, of course, not an easy thing to do. Given the current situation in particular, where as you know, there are increasing signs of military activity, particularly in this region. The key challenge that we have is to make sure that whatever the military circumstances there, we will be able to prevent a nuclear accident with serious radiological consequences. I am currently engaged in intensive consultations with Ukraine, of course, and with Russia, and hope to be able to come to a point of convergence where the sides will be able to agree, if not among themselves, with us on what needs to be done or what doesn't need and shouldn't happen. Our activities in Ukraine, of course, have been vast. We have been facilitating deliveries of equipment, not only for Zaporizhia, but also in all the other facilities, from Chernobyl to Rivne, Nitsky, South Ukraine. We are deployed all over the country. So this has been a very important, unprecedented, I would say, contribution from the agency. We have these permanent deployments in all of 5 nuclear power plants, and we are monitoring the safety and security situation there against our 7 indispensable pillars. The information they provide form the basis of my regular updates that we started last year and that are of great benefit for the international community. When it comes to Zaporizhia, again, we are focusing through ISAMS, the IAEA Support and Assistance Mission in Zaporizhia. We are reporting mainly on safety and security matters there. As you know, we have been confronted with very serious situations, for example, where off-site power has been lost completely on not less than 6 occasions. Right now, the plant's 6 reactor units are shut down, with one in hot shutdown to produce heat and steam for the site. Of course, another risk at Zaporizhia nuclear power plant comes from the staffing. Staffing considerations have been present from the very beginning. And as I've been saying, for a year now, the situation has been very difficult and it's questionable whether it can be sustained in this way. We are monitoring this situation on a day-to-day basis, and of course, it has become one of my main preoccupations. You may be interested in knowing that after my last conversation with President Zelensky, we put together a specific program for medical assistance for all the NPPs in Ukraine, assisted by our own medical experts for the sites and the surrounding medical facilities that will be benefiting from our support. When it comes, of course, to safeguards measures, and in spite of all the difficulties there, we have been able to ensure throughout this war that all our activities have been continuing in all of these sites. And this has been to a large extent due to the diligence, the professionalism of our nuclear safeguards and also nuclear safety and security experts. So, in closing, as you can see, the agency is facing this unprecedented challenge with determination. We haven't been sitting on the sides or observing. We are involved. We are there, both on the safeguards and also on the safety and security aspects of this dramatic conflict. You can count on our dedicated efforts to never give up and to continue making sure that we will give it all to prevent an accident there. That being said, I want to wish you a successful joint annual meeting. Thanks for your attention.
Many thanks to Director General Grossi for recording and sending this address. I hope his colleagues will pass our appreciation for it, and also as a Ukrainian here in the room, please do parlay my sincere appreciation for the work the agency has been doing in Ukraine, and in particular Zaporizhia. I think it is not accidental that the very first address, that the very first set of remarks in this conference has mentioned Ukraine and the unprecedented challenges the Russian invasion and occupation of Zaporizhia has created for us. I think we'll hear that topic reverberate through many other sessions here, and I'm sure there will be questions about that going forward. But for now, let me introduce our next speaker, Robert Floyd, Executive Secretary of the Comprehensive Test Ban Treaty Organization, who will offer some of his reflections on the state of the ban of nuclear testing, its successors to date, and its prospects for the future. Dr. Floyd.
Thank you. Thank you, Mariano. So good morning. For me, it's a great pleasure to be here at INMM ESARDA joint meeting. I know those that had this vision for so long that this is something that should happen in person. But something else overtook you. No matter how good your leadership is, COVID caused that to have to be delayed. But it's such a pleasure to be here now. For me, it's a pleasure to be back with INMM. But I've got a question for you. Something has changed. When I used to go to INMM meetings, they would be in Orlando, in the middle of the hot, humid summer. Or they'd be in Palm Desert with 50-degree temperatures. You've gone soft. You can't go soft. You've heard how urgent the need is. I think you need to look to your leadership and ask them some hard questions about the priorities. But in sincerity, I've got some incredibly fond memories of those meetings. Those times in harsh climates, but comfortable surrounds, and how valuable gathering together like this is, and no more than a time like now. It's a great honour and a privilege for me to be able to speak to you today. You might know me more from nuclear safeguards and security. Today, I address you as the Executive Secretary of the Comprehensive Nuclear Test Ban Treaty Organisation. I will share with you my thoughts on the contribution of the CTBT to global peace and security, and also on the critical role of science in the success of the CTBT. Agreeing a comprehensive, universal, verifiable, and non-discriminatory prohibition on nuclear testing was no small accomplishment. When the CTBT opened for signature, it was a momentous achievement for humanity and a victory for science and for diplomacy. More than 40 years had passed between the first call for a test ban in 1954 and the adoption of the CTBT in 1996. We will never know quite how many hours went into the negotiations and the painstaking scientific work that was taken to pave the way for the treaty to enter into force. But we do know that that effort was certainly intense. And perhaps we owe our greatest debt of gratitude to the scientists. It was they who conceived of and designed the verification regime while others expressed their doubts. It was they who put those 40 years to good use, and they made sure that when the right moment came, we were ready to seize that moment. Fast forward with me from the adoption of the treaty in 1996 to today, and the CTBT is a success worth celebrating. Since its adoption, it has delivered a powerful, near-universal norm against testing. Before 1996, over 2,000 nuclear tests. After 1996, less than 1 dozen. And this century, by one state alone. Friends, that is success. 186 states have signed the treaty. 177 have ratified it. That is remarkable. Only 10 states have yet to sign. Such is the collective ambition and the support for this noble cause. Remarkably, since the start of 2022, we've seen a great surge in states ratifying the CTBT. 7 states have recently ratified the treaty, and I know there's quite a few more this year. I had a foreign minister of a country send me a WhatsApp chat message 2 weeks ago saying, "We've got it through the Executive Council. It's only got to sit before Parliament and the job is done for another ratification." And that country is yet to be revealed. It shows, though, just how important this treaty is to the nations of the world and how important the goal is to see it enter into force when we see so many nations taking these actions. Today, the greatest strength of the CTBT is the effectiveness of its global verification regime. The cornerstone of the regime is the International Monitoring System, or IMS as we call it, and it's nearly complete. Over 90% of the stations around the world are in place, operating, sending data. It is a remarkable union of ingenuity, engineering, and international cooperation. Furthermore, the IMS has already exceeded the minimum verification requirements as specified in the treaty. The IMS fuses together data gathered from over 300 seismic, hydroacoustic, and infrasound monitoring stations across the planet. It also includes the sampling of the atmosphere to detect radionuclides, which would tell us that a nuclear explosion has taken place. The data is analysed in real time, 24 hours a day, to detect a potential nuclear test explosion. But one of the great strengths of this treaty is that the science and the data is transparent, it is open, and it's accessible to all state signatories. Not only does this mean that all states can independently verify whether a nuclear explosion has occurred, but scientists, academics, governments, civil society can also harness our verification data for a myriad of other purposes. And again, the scientists, they have delivered. Our technology is benefiting humanity well beyond its security purpose. States are using our data to monitor for tsunamis, earthquakes, volcanoes, to monitor climate change and its impact, even to identify a new subspecies of whale. I've just got to tell you the story, right? We have these hydroacoustic stations scattered around the world listening to the sounds in the ocean, those that are worried about submarines, of a certain frequency so it doesn't actually monitor submarines. Treaty requirement. So we have these stations, and so they're just recording sounds all the time. And then we have these cooperation agreements with researchers, and we work with cetacean biologists, specialists in whales. They then listen to those sounds and are able to glean all sorts of information about whales. But some researchers working on whales in the Indian Ocean, listening to the sound recordings, came across a sound which wasn't wah, but it was something different. That was different. Something they'd never heard before. And so they wanted to know, where is that coming from? Wow, that's our core business. And so the CTBTO hydroacoustic experts were able to say, go to this part of the Indian Ocean, and that's the source of that unique sound. They went there and discovered a whole new subspecies of whale, unknown to science before that time. Maybe it appeals to the biologist within me, but it's a wonderful example which was not the purpose of the treaty, but when the treaty says the data can be used for other civil and scientific benefits, I think it's a wonderful thing. The range of applications for the data is astonishing. And I believe that we're still only just scratching the surface of the uses of our data. Tomorrow morning, technical experts from our International Monitoring System Division and from the International Data Center Division will present further on the verification regime. So if you want to go deep rather than at my superficial level, tomorrow morning is the time for you. I encourage you to attend, and you'll learn a whole heap more about our verification regime and what it does. But let's look to the future. I've provided a picture of the verification regime as it stands today. But what of the future? We're always working hand in hand with state signatories to refine our capabilities. The CTBTO is not a research and development shop. We rely on the state signatories to do that, and they deliver. For example, on my recent visit to a couple of the United States national labs, I learned about the impressive work that was being done to develop an improved seismic travel time model. This is a model which allows the modelling of sound moving through the Earth's crust not to just be a simple layered model, but actually taking a lot of the other variability into account. That allows us to be able to identify with far greater precision the characteristics of any explosion or any seismic event. And we are deeply indebted to the United States for that contribution in kind that is provided, and it improves our capability. Last year, on a different set of issues, I saw firsthand the work that's being done in Sweden on a third generation of noble gas monitoring systems. And this one is such an improvement. The precision of what can be detected is down at the minute level. So if there are radionuclides, if there is the evidence in the atmosphere, then this system takes us to a whole new level. So thanks to these advances and to sustained collaboration with and between state signatories and the CTBTO, we can confidently say that we can detect a nuclear explosion anywhere and any time. But it's not all about investing in our technologies. Indeed, technology means nothing if we don't have the people to support and to carry out our mission. I cannot say enough on how important it is to engage with the youth of the world. The IMS will always be needed to keep watch and guard against the threat of nuclear proliferation. Even in a future when all states' disarmament commitments have actually been fulfilled, the IMS will still be essential. We will need to pass the torch to ready and capable hands generation after generation. The CTBT Young Professional Network is one example of how we're helping to build a strong future. It's a community of young scientists and technical professionals working on monitoring and verification for the CTBT, and it aims to help build and sustain the skills that we need to take forward the work of the CTBTO. I'm also determined to have more women participate and lead in our scientific and technical work. In the last 2 years, it is encouraging that the proportion of women in the CTBTO in the professional and higher levels has risen from 31%, where it was on a plateau for about 6 years, to over 40% now. That's progress, and I'm pleased, but I'm not happy. We still have further to go. One of our initiatives is the CTBTO mentoring program for early career women in STEM. This program supports young women from underrepresented geographic regions to find a career path in STEM and perhaps work with the CTBTO. I commend it to you and sincerely hope to see more early career women from across the globe applying for our scientific and technology-based roles. But in closing, friends, we are living in extraordinary and challenging times, there is no doubt. But the thing about challenge, even crisis, is that it creates opportunity. It is clearer now than at any other time in recent history how important it is to reinforce the non-proliferation and disarmament regime. Many states and leaders are taking the opportunity to reaffirm their commitments and obligations, to show their support for a system that has helped deliver decades of peace and security dividend. And a prime example is you must go and read the G7 leaders' statement last Friday, delivered in Japan. Incredibly strong language in there about the commitment of those leaders of G7 to the CTBT and to seeing it enter into force. All of those leaders signed on. I cannot imagine on the flip side, what the world would be like today without the NPT, without the CTBT, without verification regimes underpinned by objective data and scientific expertise. Systems that we trust to help keep us safe. Systems that give confidence to every state that all other states are abiding by their commitments. So colleagues and friends, the CTBT is a success. Our verification regime is doing a great job already. It works well, actually better than well. It will shine a light on any state that chooses to conduct a nuclear test. And it is clear that the international community wants that light to shine brightly. It gives confidence to states who have committed to a moratorium on nuclear weapons testing. When geopolitical tensions are high, we rely on science, on technology, on verifiable and objective facts. That is what this treaty brings. Recent ratifications of the CTBT are a bright spot in an otherwise ominous non-proliferation and disarmament landscape. However, our work is not complete. 10 states have not signed, 19 have not yet ratified. It is our shared mission and responsibility to bring about a legally binding ban on nuclear test explosions. But I hear a chorus of voices, the voices of the nations of the world, calling for a world without nuclear testing. Do you hear them? I heard the chorus from the Forum of Small States in Geneva just last week, where all but 4 of the 108 of the smallest states in the world have ratified the CTBT. And by the end of this year, it is likely to be only 2 of the 108 smallest states in the world that will not have ratified this treaty. At the origin of this precious treaty, science paved the way when diplomacy could not. Now, at this important point in time, where a legally binding ban on nuclear testing seems just out of reach, maybe science, yet again, can deliver the confidence in verification that will allow the few remaining states to ratify the treaty and thus establish a legally binding ban on the testing for the good of all humanity. I thank you.
Thank you very much, Executive Secretary Floyd, and I think CTBTO stands as a remarkable testament and a challenge for preconceived notions of what international law, international norms must be like, where a treaty that is not formally enforced can still have such a great impact and still rest on a very robust set of institutions and verification measures. Something I don't think any of us can take for granted. It's every day's work that we all must contribute to. Next, I would love to invite Jill Hruby, Undersecretary for Nuclear Security with the U.S. Department of Energy and the Administrator of the National Nuclear Security Administration. Please, we'll hear some remarks on nuclear energy and nuclear security in a changing world.
Thank you. Good morning, everyone. It's a pleasure to be here at the annual joint meeting of the Institute for Nuclear Materials Management and the European Safeguards Research and Development Association, and an honor to be with my colleagues Rafael Grossi and Corey Sylvester, Rob Floyd, and Stephan Lechner on this opening panel. Thank you, Mariano, for moderating our session. We are witnessing an unprecedented convergence of increased interest in nuclear energy, innovation in nuclear energy technology, and a deteriorating international nuclear security environment. So this conference comes at a pivotal moment It represents an important opportunity to share activities and best practices and to generate new ideas to improve effective solutions. Nuclear proliferation, safety, safeguards, and security are issues that can only be addressed through a common vision and strong international cooperation. The organization I lead, the National Nuclear Security Administration, or NNSA, within the U.S. Department of Energy, has 3 primary missions: design and production of U.S. nuclear weapons, nuclear nonproliferation and counterterrorism, and nuclear reactor design for the U.S. Navy. These missions are all accomplished in a U.S. nuclear enterprise with dedicated science, engineering, and technology talent at national laboratories, naval reactor laboratories, and dedicated production facilities distributed across the United States. At first blush, the nonproliferation mission may seem misplaced. However, its placement among nuclear weapons and naval reactors program is quite an advantage in developing science-based, informed, and practical solutions for nuclear nonproliferation. The nonproliferation program has access to amazing talent and facilities. The way we see it, the nuclear nonproliferation mission coupled with the other missions represents holistic nuclear deterrence and advancement of peaceful nuclear uses. The promotion of peaceful uses of atomic energy is a long-standing U.S. goal promoted 70 years ago this year in President Eisenhower's Atoms for Peace speech at the UN General Assembly. In his forward-looking address, Eisenhower expressed hope that the energy of the atom would, quote, serve the needs rather than the fears of mankind, end quote. In the decades since, the international community has worked together to develop an overlapping framework of institutions, treaties, and norms to develop and realize the benefits of nuclear technology and discourage nuclear weapons proliferation. While our global progress is commendable, today's environment is a harsh reminder of the work still needed. We have both unfinished business in monitoring safeguards and security from the relatively stable environment of the past several decades, and we also have new and emerging challenges arising. Doing this work together internationally may serve as an important mechanism to rebuild trust between nations at this time when we are increasingly at odds and having a hard time finding common goals. To be frank, Russia's full-scale, unprovoked invasion of Ukraine has completely rewritten the nuclear security script. Russia's violation and looting of Chernobyl nuclear exclusion zone and an unprecedented armed seizure of an operating civil nuclear power plant, Zaporizhzhia, have been major wake-up calls. These actions have put civilian lives in danger and threaten radiological contamination across Ukraine and the region. It has forced us to redefine how we think about nuclear power, safeguards and security, nuclear terrorism, and international cooperation, and it has reminded us of the responsibilities that must come with supplying nuclear power technology to other countries. This redefinition of nuclear security is occurring alongside the largest adoption of nuclear power in decades. The nuclear power renaissance is recognized as essential to combating climate change and securing sustainable development. Today, there are just under 440 nuclear reactors in operation worldwide, with roughly another 60 under construction, representing close to a 15% expansion. Dozens of additional reactors are in the planning stage, and it seems clear that more growth in the global reactor fleet is coming, and indeed is needed to support clean energy and climate goals. For safe and secure civil nuclear power expansion, new ideas must be developed for security, safeguards, and counter-smuggling and counter-proliferation. These risks are not theoretical. Plots for terrorist use of a nuclear radiological device have been disrupted, and interceptions of smuggled nuclear materials have occurred. In 2021, the IAEA's Incident and Trafficking Database recorded over 120 incidents of attempted nuclear or radiological theft or smuggling. And we know nuclear weapons programs can emerge from peaceful nuclear energy programs. The further proliferation of nuclear weapons or a nuclear incident anywhere in the world will have severe implications to peace and security and to humankind's ability to address climate change. The promise of civil nuclear power can only be realized if it's safe and secure and perceived by the public to be harmless. Effective nuclear safety, security, and safeguard measures build public confidence that nuclear energy is a viable source of clean electricity and shifts the narrative from one driven by fear to one driven by promise. The good news is that as an international nuclear community, we have developed a solid framework for nuclear safeguards and security over the past few decades. The Code of Conduct on the Safety and Security of Radioactive Sources has been in place for nearly 20 years. And the International Convention of Suppression of Acts of Nuclear Terrorism and the Convention of the Physical Protection of Nuclear Material and its amendments are well developed. Our collective challenge will be to make sure these regimes adapt to emerging technologies, from new reactor designs to new fuels to fusion energy. NNSA is committed to devising and implementing strong domestic and international export control regimes. For proposed transfers of nuclear technology, NNSA works closely with our U.S. interagency partners, experts from our national laboratories, and international allies and partners to assess proliferation risks. This process includes nuclear and nuclear-related dual-use goods, nuclear equipment, components, materials, and technology under relevant regulations. NNSA's Office of Defense Nuclear Nonproliferation maintains more than 100 bilateral partnerships and works with multilateral organizations like the IAEA, Interpol, and the United Nations Office of Drugs and Crime to counter theft and smuggling networks and to improve the security of vulnerable assets. This work was highlighted as a U.S. national security priority in March 2023 with the release of the National Security Memorandum to counter weapons of mass destruction terrorism and advance nuclear and radioactive material security. Policies like these demonstrate the United States' sustained commitment to nuclear safety and security, and NNSA is working to bring this new strategy into practice. The expansion of nuclear power creates additional proliferation challenges by increasing the overall quantity of facilities, materials, and expertise that needs to be protected and accounted. The international community must develop more efficient and effective technologies if we are to maintain the same level of confidence without a huge increase in resources. Given technological advances in satellite sensing, data analysis, and other technologies, this fortuitously may be achievable. A roadmap of the most promising technologies and an international commitment to their development is essential, and I encourage this to be discussed during this conference. New reactor types, especially small modular reactors and advanced reactors, will require new safeguards and security approaches. With advanced reactors in the early stages of development, there is an opportunity for governments, regulators, and the nuclear industry to work together, not only to strengthen safety features, but also security and safeguard features of nuclear reactors and their associated fuel cycle facilities. For the nuclear industry, this can provide a significant competitive advantage for their reactors' commercial viability in international markets. NNSA is actively partnering with the U.S. nuclear industry and U.S. national laboratories through two programs, the International Nuclear Security for Advanced Reactors, or INSTAR, and Advanced Reactors International Safeguards Engagement, or ARISE. Both programs tackle key features of small modular and advanced reactors, with INSTAR promoting security by design and ARISE providing safeguards by design. Integrating safeguards and security by design at the vendor level means that exported technology can be easier for the importing country to use and makes nuclear energy technology more likely to succeed. NNSA is also supporting Proliferation Resistance Optimization Program, or PROX, where we work with research reactor designers to minimize special nuclear materials production and diversion pathways while maximizing reactor performance for stated peaceful uses. Our hope is to apply the expertise and lessons learned from this program to advance nuclear reactors. Finally, NNSA routinely engages with industry to ensure they remain compliant with the Department of Energy nuclear export control regulations under 10 CFR Part 810, or assistance to foreign atomic energy activities. You'll find some of our amazing nuclear security safeguards and export control specialists here at this event if you have any questions on any of these lines of effort. We remain committed to working with international partners. NNSA has experience engaging with nuclear newcomers to develop the capacity to adopt nuclear power in a secure manner, consistent with the international best practices and the IAEA's milestones approach. We advise on developing and strengthening domestic legal and regulatory frameworks on nuclear safeguards and security, including implementing the country's international nuclear safeguards obligations under their respective agreements with the IAEA. To wrap up, I want to reiterate that we all benefit from clean energy, energy security, and sustainable development. Together, we can advance nuclear power as a peaceful, safe, and secure energy source. As responsible nations, organizations, and stakeholders, we have the moral responsibilities to combat climate change and to halt further proliferation of nuclear weapons. NNSA will continue to utilize its non-proliferation, nuclear and radiological security, emergency response, and counterterrorism expertise to promote safe, secure, and peaceful expansion of nuclear energy and other nuclear technology in this changing world. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Undersecretary Hruby. And indeed, as you started your address, this is the pivotal moment where the demand and the prospect and the promise of nuclear energy to help mitigate climate change is met by unprecedented challenges to the safe and secure deployment of that source of energy. Lots to think about for this community. Next, I would like to invite Stephan Lechner, the Director of Euratom Safeguards at the European Commission's Directorate General for Energy. Please, Mr. Lechner, we'll hear about the current issues for peace and progress from the perspective of Euratom Safeguards.
Thank you very much, Mariano. Good morning to everybody. Good early morning to everybody. I'm very happy to be here, and I'm feeling honored by the organizers having invited Euratom also to speak in this selected panel. Thanks to ESARDA, thanks to INMM, I think the meeting is at a very timely point in time, and it is also in the very right location with the IAEA just next door. I prepared some slides, and I thought I could see them also on the screen here without breaking my neck, and I thought I could advance the slides as well. So let's see if this is working. Not really. Okay, right. I hope we will be able to get this talk through easily because I brought some slides and the slides are animated. I thought after 3 interventions you would deserve also a little bit of visual support to a not so strong speaker. Right, Euratom safeguards might not be familiar to everybody, but it is a very well-established concept. Let me see where I need to point to click. All right. The Euratom safeguards concept is around for a very long time. We have celebrated our 65th birthday last year, and we have not gone into retirement. The activity is focused around two major areas, which is non-diversion of nuclear materials from the declared peaceful use, civil nuclear materials in the EU, and the very important international agreements that the Euratom community has struck. I'm just telling this, although the majority might know, because there might be newcomers to the conference, and because we are here in person again. And we could have taken this from other slides or from the internet, but it's better to be reminded right away in the beginning. We are having a Euratom community which is consisting of all EU member states, 27 currently, 1 nuclear weapon state, France, and 26 non-nuclear weapon states. They're all part of the European Union, and they're all part of the Euratom community. There's a very important unity of the treaties, the Euratom Treaty, a multilateral, multinational agreement, and the Treaty of the EU. And the UK, for instance, had to leave both treaties when they wanted to leave the EU. They also had to leave Euratom. Every new European member state is also becoming member state of Euratom. And that makes it a unique coupling that we do not see anywhere else in any regional system. We have seen that there is a global perspective from the IAEA, a global/universal perspective from the CTBTO, a national perspective by Administrator Hruby, but here we're talking about the regional perspective. And this is something that makes the 27 EU member states special in the considerations about safeguards, nuclear safeguards. We're having roughly 120 inspectors, 1,900 inspection missions per year, which doesn't seem such a lot in the EU, but the EU has a very well-developed fuel cycle. On the inspectors, I would like to underline, these are people working for the European Commission, like me. They are Commission officials, European Commission officials on a lifetime appointment, which is very special. They're not working in the interest of the member states where they originate from. They're working with European laissez-passer passport-type documents that give them access as an inspector on the basis of the Euratom Treaty. So this is a supranational system working in 80% of all of these travel missions together with the IAEA hand in hand, under agreements that we have struck as a community. And this is unique. On the missions, I must say, this is an effort that we have continued over the years. It has been very difficult in COVID days, but I'm grateful for the inspectors who are traveling under very weird conditions, as everybody knows, and are verifying the declarations of operators day by day, again and again. And this is a very important instrument also for the Green Deal of the European Commission, of the European Union, for climate neutrality in the year 2050, where, according to the current plan, the decision about nuclear power use or not is not at the European level. It is with the EU member states. And you might know some of them have opted in strongly for nuclear, France, for instance. Some of them have stopped nuclear energy production, Germany. Others are considering entry or re-entry, entry of Poland, for instance. And these are things that are important in an energy crisis which is global. And nuclear energy will make still 10 to 15% of the energy contributions of the European Union in the year 2050. This is a long-term endeavor. And therefore, the Green Deal will not work without that share. We also know that Euratom safeguards will be around, and we have not stopped just sending inspectors to Germany just because the production of nuclear energy has ceased. The fuel rods have not disappeared overnight. They're still there, and they will stay there until we have everything on the final repository. In the EU. Started in Finland with a very successful first final geological repository. France is having plans, others are having plans, Sweden's having plans. So the EU is moving, and safeguards will be there for a very long time. I can only underline that the next generation can have a very safe job in nuclear and in nuclear safeguards. I'm a little bit worried because everybody's hopping on renewable energies and climate change, and it's very popular, it's funded at universities, it's funded in research, but please don't forget about the nuclear science, and this is why it's so important to talk about it here and to also spread the news that this is not jobs that are going to disappear. This is not jobs that are going to be not interesting. It's going to be fascinating as it is today, and it's going to be yet more fascinating with the digital opportunities tomorrow. So let's move on a bit. The system is, of course, unique because same rights and obligations to all member states. Euratom obligations hold for also the nuclear weapon state, France, giving every supplier of nuclear materials a very good understanding that there are additional Euratom safeguards for a nuclear weapon state. This is not a voluntary offer. This is part of the Euratom Treaty. So the Euratom Treaty also is providing sanctions, which is something that the international community or the United States or single nations can decide on other states, but there are 4 levels of sanctions enshrined in the treaty that the European Commission can issue on European member states or on operators. And at the international level, we are having binding agreements with the IAEA. This is something where we can talk as a bloc of nations, and the rights, certain rights on safeguards have been conferred from the member states to the European Commission. So there are no national safeguards inspectors in the EU. There are only Euratom inspectors. And this has been a very big step in 1957. It has stayed like that ever since. And it has developed over, for instance, an INSTRUC 193 that's covering 26 member states en bloc, non-nuclear weapon states. Between an agreement between the International Atomic Energy Agency, all of these member states, and the Euratom community. This is providing additional support on safeguards, strong support on safeguards. And it's really unique in the world. On the other side, we are having a so-called new partnership approach since 30 years, which is the way to collaborate with the IAEA. So internationally, we have signed agreements for efficiency and collaboration. This is something where we're doing things together for the benefit of nuclear non-proliferation, and it is marked, signed, and agreed. And it is bringing both organizations to collaborate formally. Super helpful, I can tell you. And we're in well alignment with the important mission of the IAEA. The alignment obviously goes so far that addressing current issues for peace and progress, the title of Director General Grossi's intervention here was copied over to my title, addressing current issues for peace and progress from the Euratom safeguards perspective. We are working in the geopolitical context, of course, and it is quite clear that the Euratom safeguards mandate is limited to the member states of the European Union. Candidate country Ukraine for accession to the EU since last year, sure, but we do not have a formal mandate. This is a very complex progress of opening negotiation chapters, and should Ukraine accede the European Union one day, then Euratom safeguards would also apply to Zaporizhzhia and to Chernobyl. That would be a challenge. So we're working also on areas that are related. So the EU has a position. The EU has political context to consider. The EU is supporting the IAEA. And of course, the background knowledge about what's going on in the nuclear area is with the people who are controlling 500,000 metric tons of nuclear material under Euratom safeguards. And in other interventions, I always said we are controlling them in our accountancy system by the gram. And when I was calculating how many grams 500,000 tons should be, 500 billion, I guess, then one of my collaborators came and said, listen, actually we're controlling them by the milligram. So this is what we're having in the books and yet below. And this work is giving us a unique view about nuclear materials in the territory of the EU. So if there are political decisions about what is the security of nuclear supply doing, how many reactors have stacked up, how much nuclear material there for continuing to operate with or without Russian supply. I mean, we got the data, and this is all going into the political decisions in the background. It's not visible. We're not really supporting IAEA directly on the highly important mission of Director General Grossi in Ukraine, but we're supporting the European political decisions on how to deal with energy and energy supply and geopolitical relations in the current situation. We are therefore having a global collaboration that stretches beyond the borders of the EU on non-proliferation. And this is why I'm here. This is why I appreciate that we can talk globally and that we can have the scientific community and that we can have those who got the brains for the future and can help us with our current requirements, with our operational requirements, and help us with the trends that we are seeing and help us with the trends that the scientific community is seeing and help us making way. So to make it a little bit more tailored to the event here and also to conclude then slowly, time's running out, the collaboration with the community is the basis for a success of global non-proliferation. Let's not reinvent the wheel, let's benefit from the experience that others have made and let's share this. We can see this best on technology development, where we need the scientific community. The cameras here are a very good example, coming from a research project being jointly used by the IAEA and by Euratom, having been developed with a lot of technical features. This is what we needed in the past and what we are still operating for 30 years now, developing it on. And it will still be there, but in a different way tomorrow and the day after tomorrow. Then the technical developments are not only on cameras, they're also on containment surveillance and laser and other technologies, but they're also stretching into new areas, small modular reactors, safeguards by design. All of these ideas will come and will be important and finally dominant for the Green Deal, the climate change, the climate neutrality objectives of the year 2050. And therefore we must address them now and we must address them together. It's a splendid opportunity to be at this meeting here and to exchange. And I'm happy that the INMM and ESARDA organizers have put together such a high-level, important, and a substantial program. Finally, the world is moving, so let's not move along, but let's stay ahead. And this means we might have come from civil engineering, from nuclear engineering, from mechanical engineering. But the world today is more. The world today has gone digital, and this is my personal and final plea. And this is what I can see also in Euratom safeguards. We must pay good attention to the digital dimension, and we should not therefore forget about the traditional engineering way, but we must see engineering has gone digital to a certain extent, and safeguards have gone digital to a certain extent. We should not just stay in the past with our digital considerations. We must also get in front of the game there and try to lead with particular applications. So my play here is not only engineering. Please don't forget about digital. Thank you very much.
Many, many thanks to all of the speakers. I invite you all in the audience to think about the questions and I suppose line up to these microphones in the aisles. Please remember to introduce yourself as you're asking your question. And while you're thinking, I will take the perhaps prerogative of the moderator. This is one of the perks that one has to ask the first question and start us off with a discussion. As I heard these excellent presentations, it struck me that really right here in this lineup, we have represented major institutions, major critical components of the global nuclear governance. We have the IAEA, CTBTO, Department of Energy, and Euratom. I mean, what else is missing, right? These are the major institutions that are guiding us through kind of safe and secure deployment and development of nuclear energy. And as we're facing these new and unprecedented challenges, right, where the main threat comes from not a non-state actor, but from a state actor, not least a major stakeholder in this global nuclear order and global nuclear governance. Are our institutions adequately equipped? Do we have all the tools and capabilities at hand to face these new challenges? And if not, what do you wish you have had? Knowing now what we know, 15 months into this war in Ukraine, what should we plan for within each of your institutions as we're looking forward? Can I ask you, Corey, to address this question first?
Sure, absolutely. Let me begin, first of all, by stating my pleasure and honor to be here on this panel of such esteemed individuals. I'm here on behalf of the DG, and I can only imagine your disappointment. But I wanted to say I'm coming here with a simple message, one of commitment, and it's not unrelated to the first question you answered about how we in each of our organizations respond to evolving circumstances. In this case, with the agency's work in Ukraine, the DG has been simply unrelenting. When you ask about what is needed in response, he has left no stone unturned in using all available authorities and resources that he has and that he can bring to bear in trying to address what is an unprecedented and unpredictable situation. So that has begun, that began first and foremost with clear communication around the risks involved, sounding the alarm on the dire consequences of a man-made nuclear accident. He's been extremely clear on that. The Security Council and elsewhere, we're now into nearly 160 updates from his office, the establishment, as he mentioned in his remarks, of these 7 indispensable pillars as a way to not only keep track and express really the dire situation on the ground, but also to communicate that out. He's also been unsatisfied with simply communicating about the problems, but taking action. He is an individual of action, as I'm sure you're well aware. This is then manifested in really unprecedented set of activities, provision of equipment, really bolstering the international community to respond to this war, and importantly, participate in a number of support and assistance missions. There are now, as you know, continuous presence at the 5 nuclear power plant installations. That has involved 29 teams from the agency with 61 staff members over the course of this past year, beginning since end of August, I believe. So he has had to evolve, and the agency has evolved as circumstances changed on the ground. That will continue in the future. He has not been reluctant to ask member states to do more in his capacity and to be creative on how we might best address this difficult situation, and most recently in the trying to address the staffing concerns that have been prevalent throughout. But even though at Zaporizhzhia you have reactors in shutdown condition, that doesn't mean in the event of an incident, they will still be expected to respond. So their medical well-being, their fit for duty is something that he's taken on personally and trying to do all we can to help them. And that is fundamentally something that has had to evolve over time, including a focus now in trying to establish and have parties adhere to the basic principle of not attacking a nuclear facility. That is something I think we can all get behind, and he will. I have no doubt. He's fond of saying safeguards does not stop, not even for a minute, and he will continue to leave no stone unturned. So, thank you.
Thank you very much for that response. And Executive Secretary Floyd, if I could just ask you to maybe in your response focus on how well CTBTO is positioned to, I mean, we're all are somewhat on the edge about the possibility of a nuclear use by Russia in Ukraine. And in this case, your organization that you're leading will be one of the recourses for establishing that fact should it, God forbid, happen. And in terms of attribution, how well CTBTO is positioned to respond to that task?
There certainly will be questions asked or an expectation that the CTBTO would have data that would characterize any nuclear explosion, whether it was a test for strategic intent or was actually a device. Our system stands ready to be able to provide that analysis and that data, provide it to all states, and if the UN Security Council was to request, then we would have information which is ready. But the important thing to understand is that one of the monitoring stations is actually in Ukraine. And it's a great tribute to the Ukrainian technical people that in very difficult times, that station is still operating. It's been down for certain periods when it suffered damage, but they have been so dedicated, and my staff have been dedicated to get equipment to them, so that station's operating. So the stations in that part of the world are really important that they all remain operating. The broader question about what is my institutional desire, or what would I like to have that I don't have, I probably don't need to answer that question. I would love to see the CTBT enter into force, because if it did, there are other elements of the verification regime that could be used. So up until entry into force, we're able to set up the international monitoring system, which can detect if something happens. But we could never deploy an on-site inspection team, which is the critical step that would be required if a test took place. So don't get confused by my messaging of how successful a CTBT is already. We do need to see it enter into force.
That's excellent, excellent set of remarks.
Thank you.
Undersecretary Hruby, what is your wish list?
Well, I'd like to talk a little bit about science and technology here. It is my background. It's largely NNSA is a technical organization, and I love the message, Rob, that you gave around how important science and technology was to get the CTBT where it is. I do think that sticking with the theme of nuclear power expansion, we just have to have new, efficient, effective, and remote approaches to monitor for early and high fidelity safeguards, safety and security. The IAEA just can't absorb the growth without better technological solutions. So I think as we go forward, that's very important, and it's the heart of this meeting. I would just also say that it is, as things settle down and if things settle down or when things settle down and we get a chance to reflect, I do think we are going to need new international agreements about what happens in countries during war that have nuclear power plants. I mean, IAEA, the fact that the GG had to negotiate the IAEA inspectors to be there. That can't happen in the future. They just have to, if you're part of this international agreement, that will come along, right? And other things of that type, I don't know, I won't speculate what they'll all be, but we will have to step back and say, what went well, how do we put that in international agreements, and what didn't go well, and how can we make that better going forward? So I think there's both science and technology and policy pieces that we will need to improve and reflect on for the world that we're in, which includes nuclear power expansion and complicated international dynamics.
Thank you so much. Stephan, Lechner, if I could ask you to weigh in on this question from the Euratom perspective.
Very briefly, possibly. Number one on my wish list would, of course, be the Russian war on Ukraine to stop. This is not because it's creating a lot of work at the European Commission and additional work that is burdening the organization, but it's because people in Ukraine are dying without a reason. And that would give us enough leeway to reconsider what Administrator Hruby just said, to just think about a new global structure on nuclear security, nuclear safety, and also nuclear safeguards. The second thing that I would consider useful from a Euratom perspective is really a clear delineation, which I would see less driven by the public opinion and more driven by, let's say, solid risk considerations and technical calculations on where climate change can be supported, and do we want to go for a climate change, or do we want to go for green ideology at all costs? So I can unfortunately see, and it's not a plea for nuclear only, I can see that the debate is focusing around only a very small share of solutions, whereas in the EU, the decision is with the member states and deserves a respect. We need to understand that the member states are defining their energy mix, and the European framework needs to address that it's going to be implemented in a safe and secure way. So currently, I'm seeing the public opinion swinging towards it needs to be like this or it needs to be like that. And I'm not saying that we must have more or less nuclear. That is still with the member states. But I see that we are driven rather by dogmatic positions than by scientifically based, strongly risk-driven considerations how to make it through a climate crisis that has only begun. And this will be decisions for the next 50 years, but I would rather like to see them based on something that is also still around in 50 years and has not been overturned by the next elections.
Don't we all wish that too? All right, I see a person prepared to ask a question. Could you please introduce yourself, and if there's a particular speaker you address your question to, please mention. Go ahead.
Okay, thank you. Yes, good morning. I'm Chantel Murphy. I'm with Y12 National Security Complex in the United States. So that was a great lead into my question, because this was a good opportunity to ask about climate change. You all actually talked about issues and tensions or opportunities that touch on climate change, whether it's supply chain or the need for new agreements, expansion of nuclear energy. And I'm wondering how you're thinking about the relationship between nonproliferation and climate change, and even how we should be thinking about what to be researching, or how to view sort of the next direction of research. Thank you.
Great, thank you. Now, do we have another question? Maybe I could collect two, because we're close to the end of the panel.
Sure.
Yeah?
Good morning. My name is Valeria Hesse. I represent the Odessa Center for Nonproliferation here. And my question would be the following. So many of you actually mentioned the importance of youth in the future of nuclear energy and related policies. And my question would be especially applicable to the IAEA and the CTBTO. What are your knowledge transfer strategies to the youth? And for example, I know that there are junior professional officer positions for the countries that have make their contributions to extra budgetary fund. Is there any strategy that could allow youth from less economically developed countries to be engaged in a similar manner, or could there be an initiative that could cover such issues? Thank you.
Thank you. Corey Sylvester, would you like to start?
Yes, let me take a shot at that. But thank you for the questions. When we look to the first question about the role of climate change and the role of the agency, they go hand in hand quite clearly. The mission for the agency to promote nuclear power is embedded in our statute, and certainly the DG feels strongly about that nuclear has a critical, vital role to play in addressing that concern. That can only be done if we have effective and efficient safeguards, both from when we think about the product of our safeguards efforts, it's confidence. And we won't be able to facilitate an expansion of nuclear power if the safeguard system itself isn't providing the kind of assurances that the international community demands. So we're very much aligned with that. The Administrator Hruby mentioned the S&T demands that are associated with continuing development in effectiveness and efficiency of those safeguards measures that we have, and that will continue to be important. On the question of knowledge transfer and youth at the agency, there was reference to our JPO program, which is always something we rely on, and have invited member states to contribute more extra budgetary support to help that program. And that doesn't have to be aligned with the contribution from the from the member state. It can be open to other nationalities. So we seek to leverage that going forward, as well as some of the initiatives that DG has taken with Compass, you may be aware of, and expansion of our traineeship program. Both of those increases are designed precisely to have the kinds of increase in diversity and participation in the ranks of the agency.
So to Chantal's question about climate change, our treaty is very clear and focused and narrow, and I got to say I'm delighted when the data can be used for other civil and scientific purposes which are actually elucidating the change of climate in the world and some of the impacts of that. So it's really tangential in a sense, but personally gratifying, okay? With regard to youth, that's actually core business. That is core business because we must be preparing for the future generations as we hand off and hand over, and you can't just hope it happens. We have a youth group. The CTBTO has a youth group. It has about 1,300 members from 129 states, last count that I got. This is different to the Young Professional Network I told you about before. And this is about young people that are passionate to see a world without nuclear tests. They generally go a little further than that in their passion as well, but a passion to see a world without nuclear tests. And so they're self-determining, but we support them, we provide them with input and good materials, so they've got solid stuff to be based on, and they're involved in advocacy and learning more about these issues. And some of them then come into our staff and work in the public information area, external relations, all sorts of things. But that is an incredibly important area because for quite a while, when some of you and me were at university, all the placards were anti-nuclear, right? When we were at university. But you go there now, it's all about climate change. But I'm finding, though, in this current era, there is a resurgence of interest amongst young people to understand the issues around nuclear. And we, as a broad community, we need to respond to that. Within our organizations, we certainly have interns, the opportunity for JPOs, our mentorship program. We have a special technical expert support program, particularly to bring younger people from less represented parts of the world to our organization. We're looking at many different ways to actually make young people more competitive when they apply for jobs that they'll beat the older people.
Hruby.
Yeah, we have just a recognizable dilemma. I have this conversation with my colleague in nuclear energy in the department frequently. So the existential threat of this moment for the youth in particular, for many of us, is climate change. And one of the primary solutions to that is nuclear energy. The existential threat that existed when I grew up was nuclear war. And it still exists. It hasn't gone away. So we have this dilemma that we want to keep nuclear war as a terrible thing, as a taboo. At the same time, we want to promote nuclear energy, peaceful nuclear energy, and we've got to figure out good, honest ways to talk to the public about both of those coexisting. We can't do one or the other. It's just the world we live in. Both existential threats are nuclear, and they're kind of at the ends of the spectrum, right? So that's just something I think as a community we need to work on, the narrative, the dialogue that's honest, truthful, and understandable. On the youth thing, I would just say many of us have programs, I think probably almost everyone, but we haven't reached everybody, and I think an important thing that you could do at meetings like this is to talk about the best practices, the things that work and the things that don't. We've tried many things, I think we know, and so as we roll out new programs, I think understanding what's worked well and what hasn't would be a useful thing to do.
Thank you. Stephan?
Right. On the first question, I think what was striking me more than the idea connection between climate change and the non-proliferation is the idea where to research. But research is a very wide open space, and in principle, as somebody working in techno operations, I would appreciate research that leads to an impact soon. I mean, soon can be in 5 years and 10 years, but should not be something theoretical research that possibly might never be applied. So applied research is important, and if you were about to find a very nice design for a small modular reactor that has automatically safeguards by design integrated in a patented way, I mean, that might be a good idea. But this would be something in the close future that we could really capitalize on as a society. And the link is very clear by the Atoms for Peace instrument or argument that would most possibly, help us to develop nuclear where it's contributing to a societal value. The first articles of the Euratom Treaty talk about improving the living conditions in the European Union by the use of nuclear energy. I mean, not everybody is sharing it anymore, but in principle this was the idea, and this is also where the research kicks in and where the climate change links kick in. This should be quite clear. There's a plethora of areas where in the details, in the broader sense, in engineering and in digital, you could devote your time and brains, but in principle I would put it somewhere where it can also develop traction. On the idea of the younger generation, youth altogether, it's very, very difficult. In contrast to global organizations, the European Union is limited to staff also having a European nationality, citizenship, passport. So actually, I cannot advertise here that the European Personnel Selection Office will run a competition for administrators in nuclear safeguards later this year, because most of the people not having a European passport might not be eligible. But we are trying to get the younger generation attracted. We're talking at events on occasions, and we are encouraging people. Part of my message here, it's not something from the past. It is something for a very important and interesting future that will be where there will be enough time for a lifelong career. And if you like it a lot, then consider going there and staying there. This is where we're counting on. Nuclear community, familiarity with the subject, and our colleagues are staying for, I don't know, 10, 20, 30, 35 years of a career in Euratom safeguards, in Euratom, in the European Commission. And we don't have such a large amount of churn like in other technology areas, but it's difficult to get young people in. I'm really, really afraid that there will be a big sweep by everything rushing for climate change and renewable energies, for being green and fashionable and attractive, and only few people will be able to not take the first glance and say, hey, I'll go there, that sounds nice, but really understand that nuclear is as important as the choice of energies is limited, and the technological advantages are absolutely clear if it is just deployed in a safe way. So safeguards, yes. Security, yes. Safety, yes. That would be the way to go.
Well, we have run to the end of our time, if not to the end of our interest in this excellent panel. I encourage those who still have questions to please approach our venerable speakers during the break, but it is my task as a moderator to wrap this up. Please join me in thanking our speakers for their excellent presentations.
Well done. Very nice comment.
And the important work they do day to day, not just here on the stage, but every single day. Thank you so much.